the relentless sun, scorching sands, and dehydrating winds. For countless generations, desert nomads in the Sahara faced summer conditions that would kill an unprepared person in a single day. Their solution, ingeniously designed survival methods developed entirely from desert resources that could preserve life through month-long droughts. Here's the hidden intelligence behind their ancient, life-sustaining practices. A quick reminder to follow if you enjoy this. Also, where is our community watching from today? Share your city and current time. We had responses from Tokyo to Marrakesh previously. The cultural diversity always fascinates me. Okay, today we explore the Saharan summer. But first, are you settled? Truly settled. Hydration secured. Shade situation optimal? Perfect. Believe me on this. Your eyes open to blinding light. The oppressive heat envelops your body like a furnace. The only part of you touched by a slight breeze. You're resting on a raised platform covered with woven camel hair blankets. Not exactly soft, but better than the burning sand. The temperature inside the simple stone structure remains around 100 degrees, which is actually a significant improvement from the 130 outside. The sensation that roused you is unmistakable. The scorching winds of a sandstorm that just arrived. That specific type of heat that means you'd be dead within hours if exposed outside. Unlike your air-conditioned room with its controlled humidity, you have exactly one water source, the clay pot that's already alarmingly low. If it empties completely, you might not last until tomorrow. The first rule of desert living, I can almost hear Elder Guide Anwar saying in my mind, water vanishes, you perish. And Anwar would know. By his 60th year, he'd endured 40 Saharan summers, outliving dozens of other travelers who made just one fatal error. That's the reality of desert life for centuries. There were no second tries, no rescue patrols, no emergency aid. Just you, your wisdom, and whatever you could create with your hands. So congratulations, you're a desert nomad at the peak of summer, and your very first duty of the day is ensuring you don't dehydrate before morning. The structure you're in isn't some hastily made tent. It's a meticulously crafted survival mechanism. Wait, let me describe what these places truly look like. Most people imagine a basic hut with a door and maybe a mat outside. The reality was far more complex and far less comfortable. Consider it a desert life preservation device made of stone, cloth, and animal products. You calling this advanced, you might think, observing the rough stone walls and sand floor. But that's where you'd be mistaken. These structures were wonders of ingenuity, particularly considering they were built with nothing but simple tools, knowledge, and pure survival instinct. The water in the clay pot isn't just for drinking, it's your life support system. Without it, the humidity inside would quickly match the arid death outside. You push aside the blankets and swing your legs over the edge of the resting platform, your feet finding the rough sandals you left perfectly placed for this instant. Even the few moments your feet would spend on the hot sand would be unbearable. The heat makes your old injury throb. An ancient wound from a fall that never healed properly. It's your personal weather indicator. When it aches like this, it means the heat will be severe. You move to the water pot and carefully take a small sip from the precisely measured supply beside it. Not too much or you'll waste it. Not too little or you'll weaken. This is a precise art and failing means death. Let's step back a moment. How did desert nomads even choose these conditions? I mean, who willingly subjects themselves to this burning landscape? Between 1700 and 1900, approximately 2,000 people journeyed into the Sahara Desert. They sought one thing, trade routes. Back then, desert passage was like a treasure map leading to salt, gold, and spices in distant markets. A successful guide could earn more in one expedition than a farmer earned in 5 years. The financial reward was immense, but so was the peril. The desert nomads weren't just ordinary people with a death wish. They were a mix of Berber tribesmen, Arab merchants, and African explorers, all lured by the possibility of wealth and adventure. But adventure in the desert came with a cost, and that price was paid in wisdom, planning, and sometimes lives. You know what separates the dead travelers from the living ones? Old Anwar would say, stirring the embers of a small fire. It isn't fortune, it's knowing where to dig. And he's correct. In fact, this is incredible. The entire basis of survival wasn't about physical strength or how many supplies you carried. It was about geography. Location, location, location. The difference between life and death started with choosing the correct place to make your camp. One poor decision, like selecting a spot vulnerable to sandstorms or without any shade, and you'd be finished before the first heat wave. I cannot emphasize this enough. Site choice was genuinely the most vital decision in desert shelter building. These individuals weren't just searching for nice vistas, they were interpreting the terrain like a survival guide. What were they seeking? First, natural sun protection. The perfect location would be on the north side of a dune, shielded from the direct southern summer sun. Desert nomads positioned shelters beside rock formations, dense date groves, or natural landscape features that could block the sunlight. Sun will kill you quicker than thirst. Anwar would say thirst takes days, sun takes hours. Sun protection wasn't merely about comfort, it could reduce water requirements by up to 50% while preventing heat stroke. That's the difference between having enough water for the journey and dying of thirst when your supplies are gone. A scraping noise from outside makes you freeze. Something or someone is moving near your shelter. Your musket is leaning in the corner, but you don't grab for it yet. Better to wait and listen. The noise comes again. Just a desert shrub scraping against stone. The tension leaves your shoulders, but only a little. Living in the desert demands constant awareness. The next consideration after sun protection was avoiding zones prone to flash floods, quicksand, or extreme sand accumulation. You'd be amazed how many travelers died not from thirst or heat, but from being buried alive in their shelters by dunes or crushed under collapsed roofs from sand loads. Terrain assessment required knowing how topography influenced wind patterns, sand drift, and water drainage. Desert nomads studied dune shapes that could trigger sandslides and identified wind corridors that created dangerous dust devils. They recognized landscape elements that offered natural shelter from prevailing storm paths. They avoided dry riverbeds where water could flash flood and high plateaus where sun exposure was maximum. The ideal location offered northern exposure for minimal solar heating, protection from prevailing winds, and access to water sources that wouldn't evaporate completely during summer months. I once asked an elder who'd heard these tales directly from the last generation of desert guides how they learned all this. Observation and loss, he said with a solemn smile. Emphasis on the loss. The desert is covered with the graves of those who erred. And that's the truth. There was no official survival manual. This wisdom was gained through centuries of errors, close calls, and witnessing what happened to the unlucky. The successful desert nomads were those who learned from others' fatal mistakes. You take another small sip of water, watching as the level in the pot lowers. The faint light illuminates the inside of your shelter, casting long shapes on the walls. Outside, the wind blows hot sand, occasionally finding a tiny crack in your walls and sending a needle-like grain cutting through the still air. Drainage and base preparation were next on the list. Desert nomads chose sites with natural runoff and cleared loose sand that could shift. They created foundation systems that elevated living areas above ground heat while providing stable support for heavy stone construction. Get your floor flooded in summer, you might as well dig your own grave, old Anwar would say. Proper drainage prevented standing water that could attract insects and eliminated dampness that could create unhealthy living conditions. A wet floor meant mold, ruined supplies, and eventually disease. The water is sufficient for now, and you can feel the hydration beginning to counter the heat. Your lips, cracked in painful moments ago, start to feel somewhat better. You wet them carefully, knowing that too much water too quickly can be almost as bad as none. The next critical element was sand load management. Yes, actual structural calculations, but done through practical knowledge gained from years of watching how different building methods performed under harsh conditions. Desert nomads understood that roofs needed to support sand loads of up to 50 pounds per square foot while maintaining stability during wind events that could create uneven settling. They designed roof shapes that promoted sand shedding while maintaining structural integrity under maximum weight. Imagine that. No engineers, no architecture degree, just understanding passed down and refined through observation and sometimes deadly outcomes. You hear a voice in your head, something your teacher told you years ago when you first came to the desert as a novice. Build your roof too flat, sand accumulates. Build it too angled, wind removes it. There's a perfect balance in between, and you better find it before the first storm. Structural principles were applied using traditional knowledge that had been proven through generations of desert survival. Desert nomads didn't call it architecture, but that's exactly what it was. Material selection focused on types that provided maximum durability, proper curing that prevented cracking, and construction methods that created interlocking joints capable of withstanding extreme temperature changes and structural stress. They preferred acacia wood and limestone for their endurance qualities and resistance to heat-related expansion. Not just any material would do. Green wood would warp as it dried, creating spaces in the walls. Stone that was too brittle might fracture and break. Each piece was chosen with intention. You know what most newcomers get wrong? Anwar once asked me, not waiting for a reply. They think any rock will work. But choosing the wrong stone is like choosing the wrong path. It'll fail you when you depend on it most. Now, the base systems. Desert nomads built foundations using rock and wood construction that created stable, well-drained bases for stone structures. They elevated living areas above sand level, provided thermal breaks that prevented ground heat transfer, and created solid platforms that could support heavy stone walls without shifting during temperature cycles. Stone foundations were carefully placed without cement, allowing for movement while maintaining stability. This was vital because the extreme heat variations in the desert would cause rigid structures to crack and fail. This is the part that always amazes me. These people understood the idea of thermal expansion long before many formal architects included it in building principles. They knew that a building that couldn't adjust to temperature swings would eventually break apart. The sandstorm outside worsens, the wind screaming like a wild animal. You're thankful for the solid wall surrounding you, for the understanding that went into selecting each stone, each piece. Your life depends on choices made months ago when the weather was mild and summer seemed distant. Material gathering and preparation required knowing which local resources provided the best building qualities for extreme heat applications. Desert nomads selected trees during specific seasons when moisture was lowest, cured wood using natural methods that prevented warping, and prepared building materials using hand tools that created exact joints and connections. Basically, there was a right season to gather materials, a right way to dry them, and a right way to shape them. Make any mistake and your shelter might fail mid-summer. You settle back onto your resting platform, pulling the woven blankets around you. The water container stands steadily now, a reassuring presence. Outside, the sandstorm rages. But in here, you're safe for now. As you drift back towards sleep, you think about the wisdom and effort that went into the shelter, the careful site selection, the precise construction, the materials chosen for their specific properties. None of it was accidental. All of it was vital. And tomorrow you'll need to check the roof for sand load, inspect the ceiling between the stones, and collect more water. Because summer in the desert doesn't forgive mistakes or laziness, this is just the beginning of understanding how desert nomads endured the harshest summers on Earth. Their knowledge of cooling, water systems, and moisture retention was just as advanced as their structural knowledge, perhaps even more so. The fire pops and sends a spark dancing across the sand floor. It dies quickly, but not before reminding you of the central truth of desert life. Water means life, and in the desert, life is never guaranteed. You wake again several hours later, not to the screaming wind, but to the deep thirst that tells you the water is nearly gone. The dark is complete, that special kind of absolute black that only exists in remote places without any lights for hundreds of miles. Your mouth feels completely dry. The blankets have kept you from overheating, but just barely. The storm outside hasn't lessened. If anything, it's strengthened. You can hear the wind's low roar as it searches for any weakness in your shelters. Defenses. Water vanishes. You perish. Old Anwar's words echo in your head again. Time to move fast. You swing your legs over the edge of the resting platform, sliding your feet into those lined sandals you strategically place before sleeping. The floor is hot enough to steal the moisture from your body through your feet in minutes. The water pot is down to a few last drops, still there, but barely. This is the most crucial moment of the day. If you don't find more water soon and quickly, the conditions inside will become as deadly as the scorching heat outside. What most people don't realize is that creating and maintaining life-sustaining hydration in these remote desert shelters required a sophisticated understanding of water collection, storage, and conservation using only natural materials and simple systems. There were no taps to turn, no backup supplies, just your knowledge and whatever you could find with your hands. Elias Bassam, a desert guide who survived the terrible summer of 1815, once described it this way. Out there, your water pot isn't just for drinking. It's the beating heart of your shelter. Design it wrong and you'll thirst with a full container. You kneel by the water pot, feeling the faint coolness from the remaining liquid. The design of this pot isn't random. It's the result of generations of trial and error where errors meant death. Water storage construction was the core of desert shelter hydration systems. But these weren't the decorative, porous containers you might find in some modern camps. Desert nomads made pots using local clay carefully selected for its ability to withstand extreme temperature changes without breaking. You grab several small pieces of cloth from a neatly folded pile beside the pot. Not random rags, these are specifically prepared and sorted by thickness to create the perfect evaporation cooling. You arrange them carefully over the pot, creating tiny air spaces between each layer. Proper water storage design included containers sized for efficient cooling, placement systems that created proper shade while preventing heat gain, and cooling methods that stored water during cooler periods and kept it cool over extended periods. The trick isn't just having water, old Anwar once told a novice who was struggling to stay hydrated despite carrying plenty of water. The trick is making the water work for you. Most fools just drink warm water and sweat it out. You dampen the cloth gently, coaxing them to cool the pot. A slight coolness appears, spreading along the surface of the clay. You adjust it carefully, gradually adding more layers as the cooling effect grows. Pot design and placement required understanding evaporation principles, heat, avoidance, and structural stability under extreme temperature conditions. Desert nomads made pots using clay construction that could withstand daily heating, created proper insulation that ensured cool storage, and incorporated cooling systems that captured nighttime coolness before it disappeared with the sun. Wait, hold on. Did you catch that? Cooling systems. Yeah, these ancient desert nomads were building coolers into their water pots by burying them in the ground or using wet cloth covers before the heat came. They extracted maximum coolness from every bit of precious water. See how this pot is shaped here, then narrows there, Anwar would explain. pointing to the carefully formed container. That isn't random. That's so the heat can't penetrate too fast. Makes your water last twice as long. They understood that proper pot design could increase cooling efficiency by up to 30% while preventing dangerous contamination and bacterial growth. Get it wrong, and you'd either dehydrate or get sick. The water is cooling properly now, becoming more palatable. You take a few more small sips, slightly larger, this time. The hydration begins to push back against the thirst, and you can feel sensation returning to your mouth and throat. Picture this. It's 120 degrees outside. The sun is blazing relentlessly, but inside a well-built desert shelter, the temperature remains around a bearable 85 degrees. How is that possible with just a water pot and no modern cooling? The answer lies in evaporative cooling systems. Desert nomads used clay and water construction that could absorb coolness during night periods and release stored thermal energy over many hours after sunrise. You look at the large stones that make up the shelter walls. They're not just structural, they're functional. During the night when the air is cool, these stones absorb that coolness. During the day when the sun is hot, they release it back into the shelter. Natural coolness batteries. Desert nomads position thermal mass strategically throughout shelters to create even temperature distribution while maximizing coolness storage using materials that were readily available in desert environments. They calculated thermal mass requirements based on shelter size, insulation levels, and expected cooling loads during extreme weather conditions. You want stones that hold coolness, Anwar would say, tapping a particular rock with his knuckle. Not all rocks are the same. Some hold coolness like a miser holds silver. Others let it slip away like sand through fingers. And he was right. Different types of stone have different thermal properties. Basalt, for example, has excellent heat retention. Limestone is decent. Sandstone, not so much. Desert nomads knew which stones would best serve as coolness batteries long before the science of thermal conductivity was formally understood. The water is cool now, relieving the deep thirst and dry feeling. You can feel your thirst less and less as the hydration takes effect. The heat retreats from your skin. What about air movement? It's not enough to have cool water in one corner if the rest of your shelter remains burning hot. Air circulation systems use natural convection and shade principles to move cooler air throughout shelter spaces. Desert nomads designed interior layouts that promoted airflow while preventing heat gain through poorly placed openings. Strategic placement of thermal mass and cooling elements created convection currents that distributed cool air evenly throughout living spaces. You notice how the sleeping platform is positioned elevated above the floor, but not too close to the ceiling. This is intentional since hot air rises. The highest point in the shelter would be the hottest. Too high and you'd overheat while resting, too low and you'd bake. The platform is placed at exactly the right height to maintain comfortable resting temperature. 3 feet off the ground, Anwar would say. Any higher and you'll roast like meat. Any lower and you'll bake like bread. They understood that proper air distribution could eliminate hot spots and reduce overall water consumption by up to 25%. Every drop of water saved meant one more day of survival when conditions made finding more impossible. Now let's talk about water conservation because not all water use is equal. Desert nomads maximized it through proper consumption techniques, storage management, and container design that extracted maximum hydration from available water while minimizing waste and loss. You arrange the water containers in a specific pattern, not the open bowls most casual travelers use, but a carefully structured arrangement that allows for minimal evaporation and sustained supply. Look at these city dwellers, Anwar would laugh, watching a group of northern merchants struggle with their open, warming water skins. They think any container stores the same. There's storage that conserves, and there's storage that just loses water. Know the difference or die of thirst with a full container. Desert nomads understood which container materials provided the best insulation, how to position and protect water for optimal storage, and how to manage supplies for continuous hydration. They knew that thick clay pots provided long-term cooling, while animal skins provided portable but quicker warming storage. You think about the water supply stacked against the wall. Each container was selected, filled, and stored with purpose. The smaller skins for immediate use, the larger clay pots for long-term storage. Nothing random about it. A particularly strong gust of wind makes the shelter shake. Something shifts on the roof, probably sand sliding off thanks to the curved roof shape. The sound makes you think about how much water you have left. Supply management systems ensured adequate water reserves during extended droughts when water collection was impossible. Desert nomads calculated water consumption rates for different weather conditions, established water storage systems that kept supplies cool and safe, and developed water preparation techniques that maximized hydration while minimizing waste during critical periods. Your eyes drift to the water pile. You estimate you have enough for 3 days of careful consumption at the current rate. If the heat lasts longer than that, you'll need to venture out, no matter how dangerous, to find more. Always have twice the water you think you'll need was one of Anwar's most repeated lessons. Weather doesn't care about your plans. Desert nomads typically stored enough clean water to last through week-long heat waves, with emergency reserves for extended dry periods. Running out of water mid-drought was a death sentence, plain and simple. Outside, the wind blows again, finding some tiny gap in the ceiling between stones and sending a grain of sand cutting through the still air. You make a mental note to find and seal that gap when there's more light. Heat protection techniques included insulation systems, shade methods, and reflective barriers that prevented heat gain while maintaining adequate ventilation for safety and air quality. Wait, insulation? But I said earlier these shelters didn't have insulation as we know it today. That's true. They didn't have foam or fiberglass, but they absolutely had insulation. Desert nomads used natural insulation materials, including animal wool, woven grass, and mud plaster, that created effective thermal barriers while allowing controlled air exchange that prevented stagnation. You run your hand along the wall nearest your resting platform. Between the stones, the plaster isn't just mud. It's a mixture of mud, straw, and in some spots, goat hair. All materials that trap tiny pockets of air. The same principle modern insulation uses. Tight walls make cool days. Anwar would say, carefully packing a mixture of mud and straw between stones, but never too tight. A shelter that doesn't breathe will suffocate you silent in the heat. They understood that proper insulation could reduce cooling requirements by up to 60% while maintaining bearable living conditions. The difference between using one water skin per day versus 2 or 3, which often meant the difference between survival and dehydration. The water is cool and sufficient now, relieving the deep thirst. You sit on the edge of the resting platform, watching the cloth covers. Outside, the sandstorm continues unabated. But in here, you're hydrated for now. What about when you needed to be away from the water? Portable cooling systems use cool stones, wet cloth, and thermal mass elements that could store coolness during night periods and release cooling energy over extended periods. You notice several smooth, flat stones placed in the shade. These aren't random. Later, you'll cool these stones in the night air, wrap them in damp cloth, and place them near your body before resting. Instant personal coolers that will radiate coolness for hours. Desert nomads cooled stones in the night and placed them strategically throughout shelters to provide localized cooling. They used wet cloth as cooling aids that stored and released moisture, and designed resting areas that maximized cool air exposure while maintaining safety margins. A memory flashes through your mind. Anwar teaching you how to survive if your water supply was contaminated. Cool stones, he said, placing several palm-sized stones in a shallow dish of water. If your water spoils and you can't, Get more. Put these cool stones on your pulse points. They'll keep you alive till evening. The fire snaps and pops as a piece of kindling ignites. The dancing flames cast shifting shadows on the walls. Despite the howling storm outside, there's a surprising calmness in here. Humans have been seeking shade and water for survival for thousands of years. There's something primal and reassuring about it. Morning will come eventually. The storm will pass, but for now your world has contracted to this small, cool space carved out of the deadly summer wilderness. You take another sip of water, watching as a level drops slightly. There's an art to water management. Not too much at once, or you'll waste it. Not too little, or you'll weaken. This is the rhythm of desert life. The constant vigilance, the knowledge that survival depends on 1,000 small decisions made correctly. You stretch your legs toward the shaded area, feeling the coolness soothe your tired muscles. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Checking the roof for sand load, inspecting the walls for new cracks, possibly venturing out for more water if the storm breaks. But for now, you've mastered the most crucial survival skill of the desert nomad, preserving hydration in the face of killing heat. Another log shifts in the fire, sending a shower of sparks upward. You think about the desert guides who came before you, who figured out these cooling systems through brutal trial and error. How many died of thirst before they learned the proper way to make a water pot? How many sickened from bad water before they understood the importance of purity? We stand on the dry bones of those who got it wrong, Anwar would say grimly, whenever he taught a new survival method, not the most cheerful teaching method, but it drove the point home. The coolness from the water has made you drowsy again. You secure the water container carefully, arranging the cloths in a specific pattern that will allow it to stay cool but accessible for hours. Another skill learned through generations of life or death summers. You return to your resting platform, arranging the woven blankets around you. The platform itself is another example of desert ingenuity. Raised off the hot ground, positioned at the right height to catch the cooler air, but not so low as to be in the coldest part of the shelter. As you drift back towards sleep, you think about all the knowledge that goes into something as seemingly simple as staying hydrated. The water storage construction, the pot design, the thermal mass, the air circulation, the water conservation, the supply management, the heat protection, the portable cooling. None of it random, all of it essential. All of it learned through generations of harsh experience in the unforgiving desert summers. The fire crackles softly, a sound as comforting as a lullaby. Outside, the sandstorm continues its assault, but it can't reach you now. You've mastered the art of preserving coolness in one of the hottest places on Earth, using nothing but the materials nature provides and the knowledge passed down by those who survived before you. This knowledge wasn't just comfort, it was life itself. And tomorrow you'd need to apply an equally sophisticated understanding of weatherproofing to ensure your shelter remained effective as the heat continued. The science of sun protection, shade systems, and environmental control would be just as crucial as the cooling systems you've mastered tonight. But that's a challenge for tomorrow. For now, wrapped in woven blankets, with the water secure, you've accomplished the desert nomad's first daily victory, surviving the day. The soft light of dawn seeps through the single small opening. A square window covered with a woven mat that lets in air but keeps out sand. You slept better than expected, thanks to the steady coolness from the water pot and the woven blankets. But something's not right. There's a dryness to the air that shouldn't be there. You sit up instantly alert. Dryness in a desert shelter during summer isn't just uncomfortable, it's deadly. Where there's excessive dryness, there's a breach in your weatherproofing. And where there's a breach, killing heat can follow. A trickle of sand lands on your hand. You look up. The ceiling is showing a sandy spot, small but growing. The wind on the roof is blowing sand, finding some tiny gap in your roof and sifting through. If left unchecked, it'll fill your shelter, your supplies, and eventually cover you. In extreme temperatures, sand means suffocation. The Rashid family learned this the hard way. During their first Saharan summer of 1835, sand filled their poorly sealed shelter near what's now Timbuktu. Despite having sufficient water, they nearly died from heat stroke. The mother, Fatima Rashid, described it in her diary. We drank every drop we had, and still the heat penetrated like a fire. The dust from the storm coated our skin. We huddled together, sweating, watching sand puddle on our blankets. 2 years later, that same family shelter remained completely clean and bearable, even during the worst sandstorms. What changed? They mastered the science of weatherproofing. You swing your legs over the edge of the resting platform and grab a linen tunic, pulling it over your head. The water needs checking first. Survival priority 1, but that leak will need fixing before it gets worse. Creating weatherproof barriers that could exclude sand, heat, and wind while maintaining structural integrity required sophisticated understanding of material science and environmental protection systems. This wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. You check the water, adding a little from your reserve. The level rises, pushing back the morning thirst. Now for that leak, you grab a small wooden stool leaning against one wall and position it under the sandy spot. Standing up, you can see where the problem is. A small section of the roof covering has worn thin, allowing blowing sand to sift through. Wall construction and ceiling systems created weatherproof barriers that excluded wind and sand while maintaining structural strength. Desert nomads used stone construction techniques that created tight-fitting joints, ceiling materials that filled gaps without compromising structural flexibility, and weatherproofing treatments that protected materials from sun damage while maintaining breathability that prevented condensation problems. You know what kills most novices their first summer? Anwar asked you once. Not heat, not snakes, not even scorpions. It's the spaces between their stones. Tiny little cracks they never noticed in winter that turn into deadly sand channels come July. You reach up and touch the sandy spot. The grit is rough against your fingers. Outside, the sandstorm has calmed somewhat, but sand is still blowing heavily. The temperature might be around 110 degrees, cool by Saharan summer standards. Looking at the roof construction from inside, you can appreciate the care that went into it. Layered reeds overlapping like tiles with mud and straw, packed between them for insulation and sandproofing. Normally it would shed wind and sand perfectly, but something's deteriorated. Stone preparation and fitting techniques created tight joints that minimize sand infiltration and heat gain. Desert nomads selected stones with flat surfaces, shaped joining edges using hand tools that created precise fits, and used traditional masonry methods that created interlocking connections capable of withstanding structural movement during temperature cycling. You remember helping build this shelter last spring? The care taken in selecting each stone, cleaning the surfaces, shaping the joints. Nothing was random. See how these stones fit together? Anwar demonstrated, showing you how to chip the edges. That isn't just for stability. Each stone sits tight against the one beside it. Less spaces means less sealing. Less sealing means fewer leaks. He was right. Proper stone fitting could reduce sand infiltration by up to 70% while maintaining structural integrity under extreme loading conditions. Every percent mattered when the temperature rose to 130. You climb down the stool and move it to one side. You'll need to go outside to fix the roof properly, but first you need the right materials. From a corner of the shelter, you gather some pre-made ceiling, a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung that's been soaking in a leather bag to keep it pliable. Sealing materials and application methods filled gaps between stones using natural materials that provided weatherproofing while allowing controlled thermal movement. Desert nomads used mud-based sealing compounds mixed with organic fibers that created flexible seals, applied sealing in multiple layers that provided redundant weatherproofing, and maintained sealing systems through them, regular inspection and repair that ensured continued effectiveness. Good sealing is like good weaving. Anwar told you once watching you repair a tear in your wool cloak. Too loose, sand gets through. Too tight, it cracks when heated. Got to be just right. They knew that proper sealing was essential for maintaining interior temperatures and preventing sand infiltration. A well-sealed wall could mean the difference between a bearable summer and a fatal one. You pull on your lightest robe, wrap a cotton scarf around your face, and put on thin gloves. Going outside in a sandstorm, even briefly, requires proper protection. You grab a wooden brush and a small bag of repair materials. Taking a deep breath, you open the door. A thick woven mat hung on rope hinges. Instantly, a blast of hot air rushes in, along with a swirl of sand. You step outside quickly, pulling the door shut behind you. The heat is shocking, a physical force that seems to suck the moisture from your skin. Even through your layers, you can feel it, searching for any gap, any weakness. This is the heat that kills, that bakes flesh dry in hours. Sand has drifted nearly to the roof on the windward side of your shelter, creating a natural insulation barrier. On the leeward side, where you need to work, the sand is only about 2 feet deep. You wade through it, circling to the back of the shelter. Roof systems were designed to shed sand and wind while providing adequate insulation and structural strength to withstand extreme loading conditions. Desert nomads built roofs using curved shapes that promoted sand shedding, windproof barriers that prevented sand infiltration, and insulation systems that prevented heat gain while avoiding sand dam formation that could cause structural damage. Looking up, you can see the problem. A small section of the roof covering has been frayed by the wind, creating a gap where blowing sand can sift through. It's not a major breach yet, but left unattended, it could grow worse. You use the brush to clear sand from the base of the shelter, creating a stable platform for your stool. Then you climb up, your fingers already stiffening in the intense heat despite the gloves. Roof construction techniques used overlapping materials that created multiple windproof barriers while maintaining structural strength under sand loading. Desert nomads used woven mats, reed sheets, and hide coverings that created layered windproofing systems, incorporated proper drainage that prevented water accumulation, and designed roof structures that could support maximum expected sand loads while maintaining weatherproof integrity. The repair is straightforward, but must be done quickly before the heat becomes dangerous. You press the loose section back into place, then apply fresh sealing around the edges to seal it. The mud mixture is already starting to dry in the heat, but you work quickly, your hands moving with practiced efficiency. 2 minutes. Anwar's voice echoes in your head. That's how long you got to work barehanded in this heat before your skin starts to burn. Count it out. Plan your moves. Get back inside before your hands become useless. You're working with gloves, which helps, but still the heat is penetrating. You finish the repair, pack up your materials, and hurry back inside, your face stinging from just those few minutes of exposure. Back in the shelter, the relative coolness wraps around you like an embrace. You hang your sand-covered robe near the shaded wall to cool and check your hands. Careful not to rub them too hard. The rapid temperature change from extreme heat to cool can be almost as painful as the heat itself. You check the ceiling. The sandy spot has stopped growing, which means your repair is holding. Given a day or two, the dust will settle completely thanks to the still air inside. This small incident highlights the constant vigilance required for desert survival. Even a tiny breach in weatherproofing could spiral into a life-threatening situation within hours. Sand management systems prevented infiltration, dust formation, and abrasive problems that could create dangerous living conditions and compromise structural integrity. Desert nomads understood that sand control required balancing ventilation needs with heat protection requirements, while preventing infiltration that could create dangerous dust accumulation inside living spaces. Sand kills you three ways, Anwar explained during your first summer. It abrades your skin, it ruins your tools, and it fills your shelter from the inside out. He wasn't exaggerating. A sandy shelter could quickly become uninhabitable in summer, leaving you exposed to the elements. Death would follow shortly. You move around the interior of your shelter, checking for other signs of sand or drafts. Near one corner, you feel a slight movement of air. Another, small gap in the ceiling that needs repair. You gather some of the ceiling mixture and press it into the gap, smoothing it with your fingers. Ventilation systems provided fresh air and prevented suffocation while minimizing heat gain during extreme hot conditions. Desert nomads designed ventilation systems that created controlled air exchange, prevented dangerous dust accumulation, and maintained air quality without compromising cooling efficiency or creating uncomfortable drafts that increased heat gain. A shelter that doesn't breathe will kill you quiet in the heat, Anwar warned, but too much breathing lets all your coolness escape. Got to find the balance. Desert nomads used adjustable ventilation openings that could be modified based on weather conditions and cooling requirements. A small flap near the base of the wall could be opened or closed to control airflow and prevent the buildup of stale air. You check this ventilation flap now, making sure it's adjusted properly. Open enough to allow air to circulate, but not so open that it lets in heat. Like everything in desert life, it's a careful balance. The repair work has made you thirsty. From a leather pouch hanging on the wall, you take some dates, fruit dry enough to make your mouth pucker, but packed with the sugar and nutrients needed to maintain energy in this climate. As you chew, you think about the door to your shelter. Door and window systems created secure closures that excluded weather while providing access and ventilation when conditions permitted. Desert nomads built door systems using multiple barriers, weather sealing techniques, and emergency closure methods that could maintain weatherproof seals even during extreme wind and temperature conditions. Your door is a solid piece of woven mat hung on rope hinges and secured with a wooden bar. Around its edges, strips of cloth create a seal that blocks drafts. When closed, it fits so snugly that even the strongest wind can't find a way through. A door isn't just a hole with a cover, Anwar lectured when teaching you shelter construction. It's a weak point that needs reinforcing. Make it solid as a wall, but able to open when needed. Desert nomads used thick wooden doors with multiple sealing layers, created airlocks that prevented heat gain during entry and exit, and designed emergency closure systems that could seal openings during extreme weather events. Some larger settlements even had primitive entryways, small chambers between the outside door and the main living space. This created an airlock that prevented the rush of hot air from entering the main shelter when the outer door was open. Your shelter is too small for such luxuries, but the principle is the same. Minimize heat gain through necessary openings. This small window covered with that woven mat lets in enough air to breathe without creating a significant heat gain point. Some desert nomads use treated leather when available, which was more durable but harder to find. Weatherproofing maintenance included regular inspection, preventive repairs, and seasonal preparation that maintained shelter effectiveness throughout extended summer periods. Desert nomads developed maintenance schedules that address common failure points, repair techniques that could be performed during severe weather, and preventive measures that avoided weatherproofing failures during critical survival periods. An hour of maintenance in cool weather saves a day of misery in hot was another of Anwar's frequent sayings. The old desert guide had a saying for everything, it seemed, but each one encapsulated vital survival wisdom. You finish your dates and take a drink of warm water from a clay cup. The morning routine of inspection and repair complete, you can now focus on other tasks. The sandstorm is still blowing. Outside, which means collecting more water, isn't an option yet. Instead, you'll use the time to maintain your gear. Another critical survival task. From under your resting platform, you pull out a pair of sand goggles that need repairs. The leather strap has stretched and needs tightening. Without properly functioning goggles, traveling through blowing sand would be nearly impossible, limiting your ability to trade, guide, or collect water once the storm passes. As you work on the goggles, the shelter grows cooler with the strengthening shade. You remove your heavy wool robe, working in just your linen undershirt. Despite the raging storm and extreme temperatures outside, the interior of your shelter is now a bearable 80 degrees, a testament to the effectiveness of the cooling and weatherproofing systems working in concert. This comfort isn't luxury, it's survival. The ability to preserve water, maintain dexterity in your hands, and allow minor injuries to heal all depended on creating and maintaining a habitable microclimate within your shelter. The goggle repairs are meticulous work, requiring focused attention and nimble fingers. You heat a bone needle in the shaded area, using it to punch holes in the leather for new stitching. The smell of heating bone mixes with the dry air, creating that distinctive odor of a desert nomad summer shelter. Outside, the wind's howl has diminished somewhat. The storm might be starting to break. Through the small window, you can see that the sand blowing has lightened, though it's still coming down steadily. You finish the goggle repairs and set them aside to let the leather dry properly. Next, you check your trade goods, cleaning them meticulously. In the dry air of the shelter, leather cracks quickly. A damaged trade item could mean poverty once your supplies run out. As you work, you think about the weatherproofing systems that are keeping you alive, the careful stone construction, the meticulously maintained ceiling, the strategically designed roof with its precise curve for sand shedding, the solid door with its multiple ceiling layers, the small covered window that admits air without letting in heat, the adjustable ventilation system that prevents stagnation while minimizing heat gain. None of it random. All of it essential. All of it the product of generations of hard-won knowledge passed down from one desert nomad to another, often at the cost of many lives. The day passes in a rhythm of maintenance tasks and water management. By late afternoon, the storm has weakened considerably. Through the window, you can see patches of clear sky appearing between the dust clouds. The worst is past, at least for now. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. Digging out from the fresh sand, assessing any damage to the exterior of your shelter, gathering more water before the next storm hits. But for today, your weatherproofing has held. Your shelter has protected you from conditions that would kill an unprotected human in hours. As evening approaches, you take more water from your reserve, preparing for the coming night. The temperature will drop further after dark, testing your shelter's defenses once again. But you're confident in the systems you built and maintained. You settle back onto your resting platform, watching the firelight dance on the stone walls. Outside, the wind has died down to an occasional whisper. The sandstorm has stopped. The worst of the blizzard has passed. But summer in the Sahara is long and unforgiving. This storm was just one of many that will test your shelter and your survival skills before autumn arrives. The emergency protocols, crisis management, and survival procedures that desert nomads developed will be your guide through the challenging months ahead. You close your eyes listening to the crackle of the fire. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, but for now, your weatherproofing has held, your cooling system is functioning, and you've survived another day in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The maintenance of your shelter's weatherproofing wasn't just a one-time task, but an ongoing process that required constant vigilance and immediate attention to even the smallest issues. In the desert, a small problem ignored could quickly become a fatal one. You wake at the sound of silence. After days of howling wind, the quiet is almost unsettling. Pale yellow light filters through the small window. Dawn in the desert, after a sandstorm. The air in your shelter is warm, but not deadly. The water has been used during the night, but the thermal mass of the stone walls has kept the temperature from soaring. Your first thought is about the roof repair from yesterday. You look up at the spot that was leaking. It's clean now, your quick fix having held through the night. Your second thought is more pressing. The water supply is getting dangerously low. With the storm past, you need to venture out today to replenish your hydration supply. In the desert, running out of water midsummer is a death sentence. But first, you need to check the water. You slide from beneath the woven blankets, the warm air brushing against your exposed face. Your sandals wait beside the resting platform, and you slip them on before your feet can touch the hot stone floor. Kneeling by the water pot, you carefully check the remaining supply, gently sipping until satisfied. You take progressively smaller sips until the thirst is manageable. Only then do you turn your attention to preparing for the day ahead. The sand will be deep after the sandstorm. Sand goggles essential. The temperature will be brutally hot, proper layering critical, and the threat of another storm is always present. Timing crucial. This day-to-day existence required constant vigilance. But what about when things went really wrong? What about when primary systems failed or conditions exceeded normal survival parameters? Layla Mustafa faced exactly that scenario during the drought of 1848, when their well collapsed under sand load and their primary water system failed. She implemented backup water procedures, emergency shade, protocols, and survival techniques that kept her family alive for 4 days until the storm passed and repairs could be made. Her diary entry from that harrowing week reads, "The collapse came at midday, sand and stones pouring down where our well had been. The heat rushed in like a demon. I gathered the children in the corner furthest from the breach, piling every blanket and mat upon them. Then I remembered Ahmed's lessons about the emergency water. Ahmed was her husband, who had learned emergency protocols from veteran desert guides. Those protocols saved his family's life while he was away trading. You pull on layers of clothing, linen trousers, a light cotton shirt, a loose-fitting robe. You wrap a cotton scarf around your face, leaving only your eyes exposed. Thin gloves protect your hands. Properly dressed, you can survive even 120-degree temperatures for the time it takes to collect water. Before heading out, you check your emergency supplies. Items set aside specifically for when things go catastrophically wrong. Emergency water systems provided backup hydration when primary water systems failed due to supply shortages, equipment failure, or structural damage that eliminated normal water capabilities. Desert nomads developed emergency water techniques using body fluid conservation, emergency water sources, and alternative hydration methods that could maintain life-sustaining hydration during water system failures. A small leather container holds your water finding kit, a digging stick, a filtering cloth, and a small pot, all kept clean and ready for immediate use. A separate cache contains emergency rations, dried dates, nuts, and grains that require little water. These could keep you alive for days if your main food supply was compromised. Anwar once told you about surviving when his shelter roof collapsed under a record sandstorm. "Thought I was finished," he said, his eyes distant with the memory. Water pot buried under sand and debris, temperature rising fast enough to feel your skin crack. That's when I remembered what old Yusuf taught me about body fluid conservation. Body fluid conservation techniques use clothing systems, resting arrangements, and shelter modifications that maximize human hydration retention during water system failures. Desert nomads use layered clothing systems that trap moisture while allowing sweat evaporation, shared resting arrangements that combine body shade for maximum cooling effect, and shelter modifications that concentrated coolness in smaller areas when primary cooling was unavailable. Cleared the smallest corner I could, Anwar continued. Used the fallen mats to make a tiny shelter within the shelter. Hung blankets to make the space smaller still. pulled on every layer of clothing I owned. Then I just sat there, huddled in that little cocoon, waiting out the storm. Body conserves moisture. Small space keeps it close. Survived 2 days like that until I could dig out and make repairs. The old desert guide's experience is a textbook example of body fluid conservation in an emergency. He understood that proper body fluid conservation could sustain life for extended periods when other water sources were unavailable. You open the door and step outside. The heat hits like a physical blow, instantly drying any exposed skin. The sand has drifted nearly to the roof in places, transformed by wind into sculptural shapes. The sky above is clear and painfully bright, the sun glaring off the sand with blinding intensity. First, you need to clear a path from your door. You grab the wooden sand brush hanging beside the entrance and begin to sweep. The sand is deep but light, making the work less strenuous than it could be. Still, in this heat, any exertion makes you sweat. A dangerous situation. You pace yourself, taking breaks to prevent dehydration. With a path cleared, you strap on your freshly repaired sand goggles and head toward a known water source about 200 yards from your shelter. This will provide the water you need, but you must select carefully. Underground sources are best, already filtered but not yet contaminated. Surface water evaporates quickly and carries disease. Water that's been standing too long grows algae and becomes undrinkable. Emergency water procurement and preparation techniques provided alternative water sources when primary water supplies were exhausted or inaccessible due to severe weather conditions. Desert nomads knew how to locate and prepare emergency water sources, including digging for water, collecting dew, and organic materials that could provide moisture during water shortages. As you dig for water and collect what little moisture you can find, you remember another of Anwar's stories, a time when he was trapped by a dune that buried his water supply. Had to get creative, he chuckled. Started collecting everything liquid that wasn't poisonous. Cactus pulp, morning dew, even squeezed desert plants for the little moisture they gave off. Survived by thinking beyond regular water. Desert nomads developed water preparation techniques that could be performed inside shelters during severe weather and understood which materials provided the best moisture under emergency conditions. When standard water wasn't available, they improvised with whatever would hydrate. You've collected a good skin of water, enough for a day or two. You'll need to make several more trips, but it's best not to overexert yourself in this heat. Better several small trips than one exhausting one that leaves you sweating and vulnerable to rapid fluid loss. As you turn back toward your shelter, you notice something that makes you pause. Fresh tracks in the sand about 100 yards to your left. Camel tracks and large ones. A reminder that the heat isn't the only danger in these deserts. You hurry back to your shelter, unload the water, and make 2 more collecting trips before deciding you have enough to last several days. The camel tracks weigh on your mind. A thirsty camel in summer can be aggressive enough to attack a lone human. Back inside with the door securely latched, you add water to your pot and cool your face. The shelter has warmed during your absence, but quickly cools again as the shade builds. You remove your outer layers, hanging them near the shaded wall to dry any sweat that accumulated during your work. The water gathering expedition successful. Your thoughts turn to other potential emergencies. Structural failure protocols addressed emergency procedures when shelters suffered damage from the sand loads, wind damage, or other structural failures that compromise shelter integrity. Desert nomads developed emergency repair techniques, temporary reinforcement methods, and backup shelter options that could provide protection when primary shelters became uninhabitable. You scan the roof and walls of your shelter, checking for any signs of stress from the recent sand load. The roof's curved shape has allowed most of the sand to slide off, preventing dangerous accumulation. The walls show no signs of cracking or crumbling. Your shelter has weathered the sandstorm well. But what if it hadn't? What if, like Anwar's shelter or the Mustafa family's well, some critical part of your shelter had failed during the storm? Emergency repair techniques use materials and tools that were readily available during severe weather conditions to address structural failures that threaten shelter integrity. Desert nomads developed repair methods that could be performed during storms, used emergency materials, including spare mats, stones, and organic materials to reinforce damaged structures, and created temporary fixes that could maintain shelter effectiveness until permanent repairs could be made. In one corner of your shelter, you keep emergency repair, supplies, extra sealing material, leather cordage, a small knife, and other tools that would allow you to make critical fixes even in the worst conditions. Being prepared for structural failure could mean the difference between life and death. When my wall started to go, Anwar told you once, "I didn't panic. Grabbed those support poles I kept for just such an occasion. Braced the sagging section, packed sand on the outside to seal the gaps. Wasn't perfect, but it kept me alive till the storm passed and I could make proper repairs." He understood that emergency repairs often meant the difference between survival and death during extended storms. The key was having both the materials and the knowledge to implement rapid solutions. But what if the damage was too severe for repairs? What if the shelter became completely uninhabitable? Backup shelter construction provided alternative protection when primary shelters became uninhabitable due to structural damage, fire, or other disasters. Desert nomads knew how to construct emergency shelters using minimal materials and tools, created backup shelter sites that could be activated quickly during emergencies, and developed emergency shelter techniques that could provide life-sustaining protection using only materials available during severe weather conditions. The most common backup was the sand trench, a survival shelter that could be created in deep sand using nothing but hands or a small tool. Properly constructed, a sand trench could maintain an interior temperature near bearable, even when outside temperatures rose to 130 or 140 degrees, hot but survivable. Anwar described building one when his first desert shelter burned down in the summer of 1820. Dug into a big dune on the shaded side of a rock, made an entrance tunnel that curved down into a resting chamber about the size of a small tent. Body shade alone brought the temperature down enough to keep from overheating to death. Lived in that sand hole for 8 days until I could build a proper shelter. Wasn't comfortable, but I'm here to tell the story. The old desert guide story highlights a critical aspect of desert survival: always having a backup plan. Primary shelters might fail. Primary cooling systems might become compromised. In those situations, having the knowledge to quickly implement alternatives often meant the difference between life and death. You secure the water again, adding a larger container that will last for hours. The interior of your shelter is cool now, almost comfortable, but your mind remains on emergency preparations. Emergency ventilation procedures prevented suffocation and maintained air quality when normal ventilation systems became blocked or compromised during severe weather events. Desert nomads understood emergency ventilation techniques that could provide fresh air without compromising heat protection while preventing dangerous dust accumulation that could kill resting occupants. Stagnant air was a silent killer in summer shelters, caused by lack of movement in enclosed spaces. This still, heavy air could build to lethal levels if proper ventilation wasn't maintained. Many inexperienced desert travelers died in their sleep, suffocated by their own breathing when sand blocked ventilation outlets or air gaps. Anwar lost a companion that way in the summer of 1830. Found Hassan still in his bedroll, looking peaceful as if he was sleeping. But the sand had drifted over his wall vent during the night. Air couldn't circulate, never woke up. After that tragedy, Anwar became obsessive about ventilation, always ensuring multiple air paths existed in any shelter he built. Rather be hot than dead, he'd say when checking. Ventilation openings during storms. You check your own ventilation system now. The small adjustable vent near the base of the wall and the roof outlet. Both are clear, allowing proper air exchange without excessive heat gain. Still, you make a mental note to check them again before resting tonight. Vigilance keeps you alive. Food and water management during emergencies ensured adequate nutrition and hydration when normal procurement and preparation methods became impossible due to severe weather conditions. Desert nomads developed emergency food, storage, water procurement techniques, and nutrition management that could sustain life during extended emergencies when normal food systems were unavailable. From beneath your resting platform, you pull out a small leather pouch containing your emergency food cache, separate from your regular supplies and never touched except in dire circumstances. Inside is dried meat, a concentrated mixture of fat and grains that can sustain life for extended periods in small amounts. Also, nuts, dried fruit, and a small pouch of salt, enough to keep you alive for a week or more if regular trading and gathering became impossible. Emergency food systems included preserved foods, emergency rations, and alternative food sources that could sustain nutrition during extended survival situations. Desert nomads stored dried fruit, preserved grains, and emergency food supplies that could provide adequate nutrition for weeks without resupply. A person who enters summer without emergency food stores is begging the desert to kill him, Anwar would say when teaching you about preparation. Weather doesn't care if you're hungry. Storms don't wait for your stomach to fill. They understood food rationing techniques that could extend food supplies during emergencies and knew how to procure alternative food sources, including cactus flesh, roots, and other emergency foods that could prevent starvation during extended survival situations. Anwar once survived 10 days on cactus and roots when a flash flood destroyed his food cache. Tasted terrible, made me sick, but had enough nutrition to keep me moving until I could trade again. Desert provides if you know where to look. Water procurement and management during emergencies ensured adequate hydration when normal water sources became dry or inaccessible due to severe weather conditions. Desert nomads developed techniques for finding water safely, conserving water during shortages, and maintaining water quality during extended emergencies. Beside your shaded area sits a small clay dish, your water collecting vessel. In summer, liquid water was often hard to find with wells and springs, dry or contaminated. Collecting dew provided the only reliable source, but it had to be done properly to avoid wasting precious effort. Rookie mistake is trying to collect dew with a dry cloth, Anwar explained. Absorbs nothing and wastes energy. Always use a slightly damp cloth first, then wring it out carefully. Uses less effort that way. They understood that water management was critical for survival and developed systems that could provide adequate hydration even during the most severe weather conditions. The day passes in a rhythm of shade, tending, meal preparation, and gear maintenance. As evening approaches, the temperature outside plummets again. Inside, your shelter remains cool thanks to the shade and the sophisticated cooling and weatherproofing systems working in concert. You check the ventilation one last time before settling onto your resting platform for the night. The water is carefully stored to stay cool through the hours of darkness. Your emergency supplies are organized and accessible should anything go wrong during the night. As you pull the woven blankets around you, you think about the emergency protocols that desert nomads developed. Not out of paranoia, but out of respect for the unforgiving reality of summer in the deep desert, the water backup systems, the structural repair techniques, the alternative shelter options, the ventilation safeguards, the food and water management strategies. None of it random. All of it essential. All of it the product of hard-won experience in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Sleep comes easily in the cool shelter. your body tired from the water collecting expedition. Outside, the temperature continues to drop, the stars clear and bright in the desert sky. But inside, protected by systems refined through generations of desert nomads, you rest securely. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but with the emergency protocols you've learned and the supplies you've prepared, you're ready to face whatever the desert throws at you. This resilience, this readiness for disaster, was the true hallmark of the desert nomad's approach to wilderness survival. Your breathing deepens as sleep takes hold. The fire crackles softly in the stone fireplace. For tonight at least, all is well in your small outpost of coolness in the scorching wilderness. Morning comes with brilliant sunshine reflecting off the sand, flooding your shelter with light through the small window. The water has been used overnight, but not completely. A testament to your careful conservation before sleep. The temperature inside hovers just below 90, warm enough to feel comfortable, but not warm enough to be dangerous. You rise and tend to the water first. As always, the routine of desert life centers around this essential task, maintaining the hydration source that stands between you and death. With fresh water taken and thirst managed, you begin your morning routine. A week has passed since the major sandstorm. You've maintained your shelter, gathered sufficient water, and tended to necessary repairs. But desert life is never truly secure. New challenges emerge constantly, and today brings one you've been anticipating. The loneliness is starting to wear on you. Most people don't realize that physical survival was only part of the desert nomad's challenge. Psychological survival techniques addressed mental health challenges during extended isolation and extreme stress that could compromise decision-making and survival effectiveness. You sit by the shaded area sipping a bitter tea made from desert herbs, not pleasant, but rich in minerals that prevent deficiency during summer months when fresh food is scarce. Through the window, you can see the vastness of the desert landscape stretching to the horizon. Beautiful, but also isolating. You haven't seen another human face in nearly 3 months. Anwar called it the summer madness. Seeing good people crack like dry clay. He told you during your first desert summer, mind starts playing tricks, starts talking to themselves, then answering back. Different voice for each. Had a partner once who ended up arguing with himself so fierce he couldn't tend to survival needs. Found him dehydrated come autumn, surrounded by plenty of water he never bothered to drink. Desert nomads understood psychological survival methods that maintained morale, prevented panic, and sustained rational decision-making during extended survival situations that tested mental as well as physical endurance. They developed mental exercises, activity routines, and psychological techniques that could maintain mental health during months of isolation and extreme stress. You reach for your journal, a handmade book of parchment pages bound with leather. Writing was one such mental exercise. Not all desert nomads were literate, but those who were often kept detailed journals, not just for practical record keeping, but as a way to externalize thoughts, maintain a sense of purpose, and create a dialogue where no conversation partners were available. You record the date, weather conditions, and recent activities. Then you write more personal reflections, memories of home, plans for autumn, observations about the changing light as summer progresses. The act of writing focuses your mind, preventing the aimless wandering of thoughts that can lead to despair. Keep your hands busy and your mind will follow, Anwar advised. Idle hands make for crazy thoughts in the summer isolation. So you follow his advice. After writing, you move on to weaving. Another common desert nomad pastime that served both practical and psychological purposes. From a bundle of reeds, you're fashioning a new mat for your floor. The work requires concentration, keeping your mind engaged on the immediate task rather than dwelling on the isolation or the dangers outside. The psychological toll of desert summers was rarely discussed openly among the people. Showing mental weakness was as taboo as showing physical weakness. But the old-timers found ways to teach coping strategies to those who would listen. Anwar's teachings come back to you as you work. Set daily goals, no matter how small. Maintain routines. Talk out loud sometimes, even to yourself, just to hear a human voice. Find beauty in small things. Remember that autumn always comes eventually. These weren't just folksy sayings, but sophisticated psychological techniques developed through generations of trial and error and extreme isolation. The desert nomads who survived multiple summers were those who mastered not just physical survival, but mental resilience. The weaving complete. You set aside the new mat to dry and cure. Next, you check your traps. Another daily routine that provides both practical benefits and psychological structure. You have two set within 100 yards of your shelter, positioned to catch desert rodents that might venture out after the storm. Bundling up against the heat, you step outside. The temperature has risen somewhat with the sun, perhaps to around 100 degrees, almost cold by Saharan summer standards. The sand crunches beneath your sandals as you make your rounds. The first trap is empty, so is the second. But your water collection was successful. Fresh water is a luxury in summer, both nutritionally and psychologically. The successful collection lifts your spirits immediately. Back in the shelter, you store the water with practiced efficiency. Nothing is wasted. The water will be drunk, the containers will be reused. Even the condensation will be collected for cleaning. Desert life demands complete utilization of every resource. As you work, your thoughts turn to another aspect of summer survival that's rarely discussed in romantic tales of desert nomads: the need for human connection. Communication and rescue protocols provided methods for summoning help and coordinating rescue efforts when emergencies exceeded individual survival capabilities. Desert nomads established communication systems, emergency signaling methods, and mutual aid agreements that could coordinate assistance during life-threatening emergencies that required outside help. You think about Fatima, whose camp lies about 20 miles to the north. Before summer set in, you and Fatima established a simple communication system. A column of smoke from a specific hilltop would signal an emergency requiring assistance. If either of you saw the signal, you'd come with supplies and help. Such informal networks were common among desert nomads despite their reputation for rugged individualism. They understood that some situations exceeded one person's capacity to handle alone. A broken bone, severe illness, or major shelter damage might require outside help to survive. Desert nomad who thinks she needs nobody is usually the first to die. Anwar told you bluntly, "Pride makes for shallow graves out here." So far this summer, you haven't needed to signal Fatima, nor have you seen a signal from her. But the knowledge that the system exists provides psychological comfort beyond its practical value. You set the water to store in a cool pot in the shaded area, adding herbs gathered last season. The clean smell fills the small shelter, another psychological boost that counters the monotony of summer rations. While the water settles, you take out your map, a hand-drawn representation of the surrounding 40 miles showing water sources, good gathering grounds, the locations of other nomad camps, and potential danger areas like quicksand patches. You study it daily, another mental exercise that maintains spatial awareness and reinforces your connection to the larger landscape beyond your immediate surroundings. On the map, you've marked several meeting points where scattered desert nomads agreed to meet in case of emergencies or when autumn allowed easier travel. These locations were carefully chosen for accessibility from multiple directions and natural resources that could support a group temporarily. The annual market was a larger-scale version of this system, a gathering of desert nomads, traders, and supply caravans that provided not just trade opportunities, but crucial social connection that sustained mental health through the isolation of summer months. They were vibrant affairs with trading, storytelling, music, and plenty of tea when available. But the smaller emergency-focused meeting points were equally important for survival. They created a safety net in a wilderness where official rescue systems didn't exist. Always know where to find help and how to reach it, Anwar instructed, and always be ready to provide it when others need. Desert doesn't care about debts, but desert nomads do. The water is ready. You pour some into a clay cup and drink slowly, savoring the clean taste of fresh water after weeks of warm, stored supplies. Good water is another psychological boost. A reminder that even at the peak of summer, small pleasures remain available. After drinking, you clean your cup with sand brought in earlier, then return to your journal. Now you record information about the successful collection, the storage of the water, and the condition of the surrounding area as observed during your brief excursion. These practical notes might seem mundane, but they serve as both future reference and as a way to mark the passage of time. Another psychological technique for managing long isolation. As afternoon fades toward evening, you begin your daily story cycle. Desert nomads often memorize dozens of stories, poems, and songs that they would recite to themselves during summer isolation. Some kept scrolls when available, reading the same text repeatedly as both entertainment and mental exercise. You recite aloud a story Anwar taught you, the tale of Zayed, who survived a sandstorm and walked over 100 miles with minimal water to reach safety. The story's theme of resilience against overwhelming odds resonates in the summer wilderness. Speaking aloud serves multiple purposes. It exercises your voice after days of silence, fills the shelter with human sound, and reinforces the narrative of survival against hardship that helps maintain psychological resilience. As darkness falls, you light a small oil lamp made from olive oil with a cloth wick. The flickering light complements the fire's glow, creating a warm ambience that fights against the psychological weight of the early summer darkness. You check your supplies, another daily routine that serves both practical and psychological purposes. Knowing exactly what resources you have available provides security and allows for effective planning. You have enough food for 2 more weeks at current consumption rates. Enough water for 3 days before you'll need to collect more. Food is limited but sufficient. Your shelter remains sound. The repairs from after the sandstorm holding well. This accounting of resources is calming, a way of asserting control in an environment where so much remains beyond human influence. Evening brings another ritual, weather prediction. You step outside briefly, reading the sky, feeling the air, noting the behavior of the few animals active in summer. High clouds moving in from the east suggest another heat wave might be approaching. Though likely not as severe as the last sandstorm, you'll need to prepare nevertheless, perhaps collecting additional water tomorrow if conditions allow. Back inside, you secure water for the night. The ritual of storing the water for slow use through the darkness is both practical survival and a psychological transition to the quieter evening hours. Mind needs rhythm, same as body, Anwar explained. Morning rituals to start the day, evening rituals to end it. Keeps your thinking ordered when the world around you is chaos. You sit on your resting platform, repairing a tear in one of your linen tunics by the light of the lamp. The repetitive motion of the bone needle through the cloth is almost meditative. Another activity that occupies both hands and mind. Night has fallen completely now. The darkness outside, absolute inside your shelter. The bubble of coolness and light creates a profound contrast, a microcosm of safety in the vastness of the summer wilderness. This contrast itself can create psychological strain if dwelled upon too much. The realization of how small and vulnerable human existence is against the scale of the desert and the power of summer. Desert nomads develop specific mental techniques to manage this existential aspect of wilderness living. Rather than fighting against the immensity and power of nature, they learn to see themselves as part of it, a small but integral element of the natural world, rather than an alien presence within it. You aren't separate from this desert, Anwar told you once, sitting outside his shelter as a summer wind approached. You're part of it, same as the dunes and the camels and the scorpions. Sooner you understand that, sooner you'll find peace here instead of fear. That perspective helped transform the psychological experience of isolation from lonely abandonment to harmonious solitude. A crucial distinction for mental health during the long summer months. You finish the repair on your tunic and set it aside. The fire burns steadily, the flames dancing hypnotically. You allow yourself to watch them for a while. Another simple meditation that desert nomads use to quiet racing thoughts and maintain mental balance. From beneath your resting platform, you take out a small wooden drum, another psychological tool common among desert nomads. Music provided emotional release, creative expression, and a connection to cultural identity that help maintain mental resilience during isolation. You play a simple rhythm, one Anwar taught you during your first summer together. The beats fill the shelter, somehow making the space seem larger while simultaneously more intimate. The act of creating music, even simple rhythms, stimulates parts of the brain that can grow dormant during isolation, helping maintain cognitive flexibility and emotional regulation. Person who can make music never truly alone, Anwar said when he first showed you how to make a drum. Got the whole world of rhythm for company. The rhythm complete. You set the drum aside and prepare for sleep. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. Weather to predict, water to collect, traps to check, maintenance to perform. The cycle of survival continues without pause. As you settle beneath the woven blankets, you practice another psychological technique Anwar taught, gratitude inventory. You mentally list the positives in your current situation. A sound shelter, adequate water, working tools, health and strength, knowledge of survival techniques, connections with other desert nomads like Fatima, skills to obtain what you need from the environment. This practice counteracts the tendency toward negative focus that isolation can exacerbate. By consciously identifying elements to be grateful for, you reshape your perception of your situation from deprivation to sufficiency. Person who counts blessings finds more of them, Anwar would say. Person who counts only troubles soon finds nothing else. Sleep approaches now, your body tired from the day's activities, your mind calmed by the evening rituals and psychological techniques honed by generations of desert nomads who faced the same challenges of isolation and summer survival. The fire pops softly. Outside, the wind begins to rise slightly, perhaps bringing the heat wave you predicted earlier. But inside your shelter, protected by physical systems and fortified by psychological resilience, you drift towards sleep, another day of desert summer survival complete. The desert nomads who survived decades in the Sahara understood that shelter construction was both science and art, requiring technical knowledge of engineering and material science, combined with intuitive understanding of how natural systems work together to create protection from the deadliest weather on Earth. But they also understood that the shelter of the mind was equally important. The psychological techniques and perspectives that protected mental health during extreme isolation and stress. Physical survival and psychological resilience were inseparable components of the desert nomad's existence. As consciousness fades, you remember Anwar's words from long ago. Desert will test everything you are, body, mind, and narrow spirit. Pass those tests and you'll find freedom like nothing else on Earth. Tomorrow will bring new tests, but for now, secure in your shelter and in your mind, you sleep. Dawn breaks with the soft orange and red light that only exists in deep desert country. The heat wave you predicted arrived overnight, but proved milder than expected. Just enough new heat to warm the landscape without creating dangerous conditions. Your shelter kept you cool and protected through the night, its systems working exactly as designed. You rise and tend to the water, taking a drink from the carefully stored supply beside the shaded wall. Morning light filters through the small window, catching dust motes dancing in the air. The routine of desert life continues. Predictable, necessary, grounding. As you prepare a simple breakfast of nuts and herb tea, your thoughts drift to the journey that brought you here. What compelled people to leave relative comfort and safety for this harsh existence? For some, it was the promise of trade goods and the fortune they could bring. For others, the freedom from society's constraints. For many, including yourself, it was something less definable. A calling to test oneself against the raw elements. To live by wits and skill in a place that forgave no mistakes. Most folks never understand why we do it, Anwar told you once, gazing out over a desert valley in winter. They think it's about running from something. Maybe for some it is, but for the real desert nomads, it's about running to something, to a life that's hard but honest, where every day you earn your right to see the next sunset. Today marks your 84th day alone in the deep desert. The isolation that once seemed overwhelming has become familiar, almost comfortable. The daily rituals of survival have created a rhythm that carries you forward day by day through the heart of summer. After breakfast, you step outside to check conditions. The temperature has risen slightly, perhaps 115 degrees, positively cool compared to recent weeks. The fresh sand glows in the morning sun, pristine and unmarked. You take a deep breath, the hot air burning your lungs slightly but invigorating your body. Today's tasks include checking traps, collecting more water while conditions are favorable, and repairing a small draft you've noticed developing near the window. The constant maintenance of shelter systems was never ending in desert life. A small problem ignored could quickly become life-threatening. You strap on sand goggles and make your rounds of the traps. No catches today, but the tracks in the fresh sand suggest game is moving again after the recent storm. You reset the traps in promising locations. Your movements efficient and practiced after months in the wilderness. Water collecting comes next. You locate known water sources of appropriate quality, collecting them with your pot and carrying them back to your shelter in leather skins. The work is strenuous but manageable, and you're careful not to overexert to the point of sweating. Wet clothing in this environment can be dangerous even after returning to shelter. By midday, you've stockpiled enough water for several days and returned to your shelter to cool down and rest. Inside, the temperature is comfortable thanks to the steady shade. You remove your outer layers and hang them near the wall to dry any accumulated moisture. As you sit by the shaded area cooling your hands around a cup of cool herb tea, you reflect on the sophisticated systems that desert nomads developed to survive in this unforgiving environment. These weren't just random techniques, but carefully engineered solutions, refined through generations of trial and error. The desert nomads who survived decades in the Sahara understood that shelter construction was both science and art, requiring technical knowledge of engineering and material science, combined with intuitive understanding of how natural systems work together to create protection from the deadliest weather on Earth. Their techniques refined through generations of trial and error, where mistakes meant death, created shelter systems that were more reliable and effective than many modern alternatives. The desert shelters weren't just structures, but complete life support systems designed to maintain habitable conditions in an environment that could kill in hours. You notice a small gap in the ceiling near the window, the draft you identified earlier. You gather some of the pre-prepared sealing mixture and carefully repair the gap, smoothing it with practiced fingers. This constant vigilance against the intrusion of heat and sand was essential to survival. A shelter isn't ever truly finished, Anwar would say. It's a living thing that needs constant care, same as your own body. Neglect it, and it'll fail you when you need it most. The afternoon passes in quiet productivity, small repairs, tool maintenance, preparation of materials for future needs. These tasks serve both practical, survival, and psychological well-being, keeping both hands and mind occupied during the long summer days. As evening approaches, you step outside again to observe the weather signs. The sky remains clear, the stars beginning to appear as daylight fades. Tomorrow should bring favorable conditions for trading. A welcome opportunity to supplement your supplies with fresh goods. Back inside, you add water to your storage and prepare a simple dinner. The rituals of evening begin, securing the water for slow use through the night, checking that your food supply won't spoil, ensuring ventilation remains adequate but not excessive. Sitting on your resting platform, you take out your journal and record the day's activities. This written record serves multiple purposes: practical documentation of successful techniques, psychological processing of the day's experiences, and a legacy of knowledge that might someday help others survive these same deserts. As you write, you think about the generations of desert nomads who came before you, each contributing to the collective wisdom that now keeps you alive night after night in conditions that would kill the unprepared within hours. Names like Al-Masudi, Ibn Battuta, Tariq ibn Ziyad. People who ventured into the unknown and returned with knowledge that would shape the understanding of wilderness survival for centuries to come. Their legacy lives in every well-built shelter, every properly designed water pot, every effectively placed ventilation system. We stand on the shoulders of dry bones, Anwar would say grimly. Every technique I'm teaching you was probably bought with some poor soul's last breath when they got it wrong. Honor that sacrifice by getting it right. The gravity of that statement has never left you. The knowledge passed down wasn't academic, but existential. Each lesson potentially the difference between life and death in the deep desert summer. You close your journal and set it aside. The fire crackles softly, the flames casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Despite the harsh conditions outside, there's a profound peace in this moment. The satisfaction of having created a pocket of safety and comfort in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. From beneath your resting platform, you take out a small piece of leather you've been tooling gradually over recent weeks. It's taking the shape of a desert fox, the details emerging bit by bit with each evening's work. This creative outlet serves as both psychological balance and a connection to the long tradition of desert nomads who filled summer evenings with handcraft. As you work adding detail to one ear with the tip of your awl, you remember another of Anwar's stories about a trader named Khalid, who survived the summer of 1825 when temperatures rose to 130 degrees for weeks on end. Khalid's shelter was a marvel, Anwar told you, his eyes distant with the memory of stories passed down to him. Built it into a north-facing cliff, used the rock itself as insulation on three sides, had a water storage so perfectly designed that he could maintain 80 degrees inside while using half the water most traders used. Man knew things about cooling and airflow that modern scientists are just figuring out now. Khalid's innovation saved his life during that brutal summer and became part of the collective knowledge of desert nomads. Each generation adding refinements, identifying weaknesses, developing solutions to problems that arose as they pushed deeper into the desert and faced increasingly extreme conditions. You set aside the tooling and prepare for sleep. The water is carefully stored, the ventilation checked, food positioned where it won't spoil overnight. These evening rituals aren't just practical necessities, but psychological transitions, signaling to body and mind that another day of survival has been successfully completed. As you settle beneath the woven blankets, the weight and coolness enveloping you immediately, you think about how different your experience is from the romantic notions many outsiders hold about desert life. There's nothing romantic about the constant vigilance, the endless work, the knowledge that one mistake could mean death. And yet there's a profound satisfaction in this existence. The direct connection between your knowledge, your effort, and your survival. The simplification of life to its most essential elements. The deep understanding of natural systems that can only come from immersion in the wilderness. Desert will strip you down to who you really are, Anwar told you during your first summer together. No pretending out here. No hiding behind society's masks. Just you facing yourself honestly, maybe for the first time. You found truth in those words over the months alone in the deep desert. The desert has indeed stripped away pretense, leaving only the essential core of who you are. There's clarity in that revelation. Painful at times, but ultimately freeing. Outside, the wind moves through sand dunes with a gentle whispering sound. The temperature continues to drop as night deepens. But inside your shelter, maintained by systems refined through generations of desert nomads, you remain cool and secure. Sleep approaches, your body tired from the day's physical work, your mind calmed by the evening's quieter activities. The transition to unconsciousness comes easier now than in your early days in the desert. Your nervous system having adapted to the rhythms of wilderness, life. As you drift towards sleep, you reflect on the legacy of the desert nomads. Not just their practical knowledge of shelter construction and survival techniques, but their philosophy of self-reliance, their respect for the power of nature, their understanding of humans placed within rather than apart from the natural world. This wisdom earned through harsh experience in unforgiving environments offers insights relevant beyond the desert context. In a world increasingly removed from direct interaction with natural systems, the core desert nomad's intimate understanding of those systems provides a valuable perspective. Their shelters weren't just structures, but expressions of a relationship with the environment, working with natural principles rather than against them, using local materials in ways that maximize their inherent properties, creating systems that were elegant in their efficiency and profound in their effectiveness. As veteran desert guide Rashid Al Hassan wrote in 1890, "A person's shelter is their life in the desert. Build it right and it will. Keep you cool through the worst heat nature can send. Build it wrong and it becomes your tomb." The simplicity of that statement belies the depth of knowledge behind it. The understanding of site selection, structural engineering, thermodynamics, weatherproofing, emergency protocols, all integrated into comprehensive systems for maintaining life in conditions that actively threatened it. Your consciousness continues to fade, sleep coming on more strongly now. The fire pops softly, a comforting sound that has accompanied the human sleep for countless generations. The woven blankets hold your body's coolness close, creating a microclimate of comfort, despite the extreme temperatures outside. In this moment, suspended between wakefulness and sleep, there's a profound connection between past and present. The desert nomads of the 1800s, and you now using the same principles, the same materials, the same techniques to survive the same unforgiving environment. That continuity across time speaks to something essential about human adaptation and resilience. The specific challenges may change, but the core requirements for survival remain constant. Shelter, water, food, and the knowledge to secure them in whatever environment that we find ourselves. Sleep deepens, your breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the fire's gentle crackling. Your last conscious thoughts are of gratitude for the knowledge passed down that keeps you alive night after night, for the shelter that stands between you and the killing heat, for the skills that allow you to maintain that shelter through the worst weather the desert can deliver. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but for now, wrapped in woven blankets with the water secure, you've accomplished the desert nomad's daily victory, surviving another day in one of Earth's most hostile environments through knowledge, preparation, and respect for the forces of nature. As you sleep, the wind begins to blow again outside, soft breezes drifting over the dunes. Inside, the temperature remains stable, the shelter systems working as designed to maintain the bubble of habitability that makes survival possible. This is the legacy of the desert nomads. Not just techniques for building shelters, but comprehensive systems for creating and maintaining life-sustaining conditions in environments that would otherwise prove fatal. Their knowledge earned through generations of harsh experience remains relevant even in our modern world. so removed from the direct survival challenges they faced. And now, as you rest comfortably in your own bed, far from the harsh desert summer, perhaps there's something valuable in remembering these pioneers of survival, their resourcefulness, their self-reliance, their intimate understanding of natural systems, all qualities that might serve us well even in our technology-cushioned present. The desert nomad shelters were more than just protection from the elements. They were expressions of human ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience in the face of extreme challenges. They stand as testaments to our capacity to survive and even thrive in conditions that seem impossibly hostile. As your own consciousness drifts towards sleep, cushioned by modern comforts, the desert nomads could scarcely imagine. Perhaps there's comfort in knowing that the same human ingenuity that allowed them to survive Saharan summers continues to find solutions to the challenges we face today. Different in nature, but no less requiring our creativity, knowledge, and determination. Sleep well, knowing that you carry within you the same capacity for resilience that allowed the desert nomads to face the deadliest heat waves and emerge with stories to tell. Stories that, like yours, eventually find their way to peaceful sleep